All right. Hi, Martin, Desan, and Brayden. Okay, so today we are doing a reading assignment for our e-learning. We're going to be reading about a book that was written in the early 1800s where questions about technology are asked. And this book has had a lot of influence on culture since then. So we're going to read an article. What you have to do for your e-learning is listen to me read this article to you. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you to take a certain picture. Once we're done with the reading and the video is over, you need to take that picture that I told you to take, which again will be at the end of the video, and you need to submit that to Google Classroom, and that'll be your points for today. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up the screen so you guys can follow along, and then that will be it. Okay, so we're reading about Frankenstein. So this is Frankenstein 200 years later. All right, Frankenstein, 200 years later, the story of a scientist and the creature he brought to life continues to serve as a cautionary tale for today's world. Okay. Even if you've never read the novel Frankenstein or knew there was a novel, you know the story. You've seen it depicted in movies and cartoons, and you've spotted the monster on cereal boxes and at Halloween parties. The tale of the rogue scientist and the creature he brought to life is 200 years old, yet it seems as if it were ripped from today's headlines. Hot topics today include scientists creating synthetic organisms, engineers designing increasingly powerful artificial intelligence systems, and researchers growing organs in petri dishes. How did Mary Shelley, just 18, come up with this story, and what can we learn from it today? It all started with a dare on the unusually cold and stormy night of June 15, 1816. A group sat in a stately house on the shores of Switzerland's Lake Geneva. "We will each write a ghost story," said the party's host, the famous poet Lord Byron. Mary, born Mary Wollstonecraft Goodwin, and her soon-to-be husband, the poet Percy Shelley, were spending the summer with Byron. The weather was so terrible that they huddled indoors. They read by candlelight from a book of German folk tales about vampires and tortured souls. Mary Shelley recalled later that the seed for Frankenstein had come to her in vision deep in the night. "I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life and stir with an easy, half-vital motion." Sorry, guys. Frankenstein is often regarded as one of the first science fiction novels. It tells the story of a young student, Victor Frankenstein, who abandons his studies to pursue his dream of bringing the dead back to life. He robs graveyards and slaughterhouses for body parts and cuts himself off from everyone. When Victor finally succeeds, the creature horrifies him and he flees. His highly intelligent, inhumanely strong being is left to fend for himself. Repeatedly rejected by his maker and society at large, the creature becomes a monster. He takes his revenge by killing everyone Victor loves. To create her novel, Shelley drew on her troubled past and her extensive book knowledge. Her mother, the feminist philosopher Mary Wollstonecraft, had died after giving birth to her. She claimed she learned to read by tracing the letters on her mother's tombstone. She spent many hours visiting the grave as a girl, and Shelley's own first child died at just a few weeks old. Frankenstein reflects this personal history. It's a story about the dangerous and unpredictable process of bringing life into the world. Shelley was also well-versed in the philosophical and scientific ideas of the time. Her father, William Godwin, a well-known philosopher, and her stepmother homeschooled her. Shelley studied Latin and Greek. She also read widely in philosophy, the sciences, and other fields. She was extremely unusual for a woman of that era. Shelley was particularly interested in galvanism. It was a new scientific theory that electricity could be used to stimulate or restart life. As a result, Shelley came up with a strange new kind of book. It has the plot of a Gothic adventure story filled with murder and mayhem, but also reads like a work of philosophy because of its strangeness, its violence, and the author's gender. Only a third-rate publisher would take the project. The author's real name was kept a secret. Finally, on January 1st, 1818, Shelley's novel Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, appeared in a print run of 500 copies in London. The reviews were mixed. Early readers did not like Frankenstein, says Charlotte Gordon, author of Romantic Outlaws, a biography of Shelley and her mother. They did not know who the author was, as it was published anonymously. When they found out that Frankenstein was written by a woman, they were horrified. All right, so this is Mary Shelley right here. Okay, the author. One critic, Gordon says, thought the author must be as monstrous as the monster she created. But despite the public's uneasiness, the proof of Frankenstein's impact was in how quickly people borrowed it. By that measure, the novel was a huge success. It led to numerous stage adaptations in the years that followed. These plays often opened to huge crowds and scandalous publicity. When the English Opera House in London advertised the first adaptation of the improper work called Frankenstein in 1823, the advertisement said, "Do not take your wives, do not take your daughters, do not take your families." Shelley had put her finger on the uncomfortable intersection of scientific and technological change that was sweeping the world in the form of the Industrial Revolution. The rise of mechanized production and the shift from an agricultural-based society to an industrial one marked the era. Experimental science was still in its early days. In fact, at the time the book was published, the word scientist did not exist. Shelley's flawed character, Victor, actually predated its first use by at least 10 years. Shelley also used much older religious and ethical dilemmas about creating life and taking responsibility for our actions. Today, Frankenstein is one of the most read novels in history. It's available in hundreds of editions and translations. It's assigned in more college classes in the US than any other novel, according to the Columbia University-based Open Syllabus Project. And it appears on many high school reading lists. The creator and the creature haunt us in film and television too. Millions of people have seen variants of Shelley's original tale in these mediums. Many of these modern Frankensteins trace their roots back to the 1931 film adaptation. In it, Boris Karloff plays the creature as a menacing but largely mute presence. His portrayal was a major departure from Shelley's hyper-articulate and intelligent being. In literature and film, the creature continues to be celebrated through reinventions. The recently published Pride and Prometheus is a mashup of Shelley's novel with Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. The recent movies Victor Frankenstein, starring Daniel Radcliffe, and Frankenweenie, a Disney animated film, also featured the monster. The central image of Victor bringing a dead body to life has become embedded in our culture. In fact, we've made Franken a prefix to cast almost anything in an alarming and unnatural light, like Frankenfood. Okay, so I'm going to read this part. Modern-day Frankensteins. Scientists are discovering ways of altering human and animal DNA and wrestling with the potential consequences. What if scientists could cure some of the worst inherited diseases by removing genes that are responsible for the disorders and replacing them with healthy genes, or rid a person of cancer by programming the cells in their body to attack the illness? Experts say we may not be far off from making these once unthinkable possibilities a reality now that scientists are discovering ways of editing genes so they behave in different ways. This new technique for the cut and paste style of editing DNA is called CRISPR. The first human trials of the gene editing technology are slated to begin in the US and Europe this year. In China, such experiments have been going on since 2015. The Wall Street Journal reports that in China, at least 86 people have had their genes edited. But CRISPR and other medical advances raise a host of concerns, similar to the ones Victor Frankenstein wrestles with in the novel Frankenstein. Scientists have begun debating, for example, whether creating, quote, designer babies by pre-selecting their genes to rid them of diseases and perhaps even give them more desirable traits would be safe and ethical. Or whether we should modify the genetics of mosquitoes to stop them from carrying malaria without fully knowing what effect that will have on the ecosystem. Those debates will only increase as scientists become more adept at manipulating life the way Frankenstein did. When the technology gets to the point of being safe and effective enough, says Dana Carroll, a biochemistry professor at the University of Utah, the question is, in what circumstance would you use it? Scientists have 3D printed ears and other human body parts out of living cells. All right, so here's the evolution of a monster. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein has inspired more than 90 films, about 80 stage adaptations, and at least 650 comic books and cartoon strips. The first Frankenstein film, 1931, in the sound era featured Boris Karloff as the monster, shown on page 18. How has a creature changed since then? So this is what he looked like in 1931. All right, so this was Frankenstein as portrayed in The Munsters, 1964. The Bride of Frankenstein in 1935. Frankenberry cereal in 1971. The movie Frankenweenie in 2012. And Hotel Transylvania, also from 2012. Okay, robots and clones. Above all, Frankenstein is a parable about scientific discovery and technological innovation. Victor's great crime in the novel is not bringing something new to life, but failing to anticipate the consequences of that act and turning his back on his creation. The story Shelley wrote as pure science fiction now seems all too real. Every year, high school and college students around the world take part in the International Genetically Engineered Machine Competition. In it, they compete to create genetically modified organisms, GMOs. Researchers at Google and other companies are developing artificial intelligence systems capable of outperforming humans at many tasks, such as reading X-rays. Roboticists are building increasingly lifelike machines with limbs and sensors that would allow them to mimic many human behaviors, like running, jumping, and manipulating objects with their synthetic hands. Bioengineers have cloned sheep, dogs, horses, and monkeys. They're even discovering ways of editing people's DNA. Today's high school students will be the next generation of engineers, scientists, politicians, and everyday citizens making choices about how to use genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. As we explore new technologies and their consequences, some scientists believe we can learn from Victor's mistakes. After all, one reason he made such poor moral choices was that he closed himself off from society and refused to ask anyone for help or advice. Bioengineer Kevin Esvelt writes in an article for the website Slate that Frankenstein has much to teach us about scientific creativity and responsibility today. The message, he says, is clear. Scientists should hold themselves morally responsible for all consequences of their work. At least, the least we can do is muster enough humility to ask for help. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do, what you need to do for your assignment to show that you listened to the whole article, is take a picture of you doing something scary, or find a picture on the internet of something scary, or take a picture of yourself doing a scary face, just something scary, Halloween-like. That's it. So find a picture or take a picture and submit that, and then you'll have all your credit for today. All right, so I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I will talk to you guys tomorrow, and don't forget, if you haven't already turned in your project from last week, it is due today. It was due at 9 o'clock today, so make sure you get it turned in as soon as possible. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. All right, bye.